Okay, welcome everyone to another episode of Warriors Whiteboard Wednesday. Daishian Miller here from Warrior Concepts. See, I haven't had my name badge on. Anyway, all right, so another episode of Warriors Whiteboard Wednesday. So what that means is that we are taking a look at the strategic and tactical side of some aspect of the art. In this case, we're going to take a look at Hicho no Kamae, one of the defensive postures. As a matter of fact, in the Gyoko school, it is one of the Sanden Kamae, so one of the three aspects of this core idea of controlling the situation, right? Arguably, again, how would I say this? My show, so it's my opinion. Arguably, probably one of the most misunderstood postures, right? As a matter of fact, during this week's Kuden podcast, one of the listeners, after I had gone into a bunch of deep things, not just on the outward side, but also how to apply Hicho mentally and emotionally from non-physical combat perspectives. What they said was, up to this point, they had thought that, Hicho just didn't have any practical real-world use. And we hear that a lot, right? Which, on the bad side is, I don't know, it's disappointing, right? Which means that something is going on when things are being taught. And so we'll talk about some of those things because one of the first things we'll talk about is what Hicho is not, and that it's often just limited to some of these little descriptors, right? On the good side is we don't want to fight like everybody else. So it's good that most people look at it, make a snap judgment that is wrong, underestimate those kind of things, right? So that's not a bad thing. Okay, so I've got a full slate for you today. Let me just bring up my notes here very, very quickly, and we'll just jump right into things. All right, so what we're actually looking at, I had considered subtitling this. What I'm calling it is Observation, Deception, and Adaptability, because these are three key points within Hicho. Also, I didn't have the room for it without making things too tiny. I would also throw in patience, right? Exercise in patience. So what I had considered subtitling it was a strategy in stillness. Okay, so anyway, let's do what I normally do, and we'll take a look at starting with a problem. Okay, and the problem in this realm is that more often than not, students who should have been taught better and instructors who should know better continue to translate the word kamae as a stance. It's not a stance. The word for stance in Japanese is dachi, right? Not only are they two different words and the kamae or the kanji are different and whatnot, but these two words, these two ideas point to very different things, not just in function, but even the way the body's set up and where the name for each individual thing comes from. Okay. For instance, dachi are typically named for the position of the legs, right? Horse stance, cat stance, those kind of things, right? Kamae are typically named for the position of the upper body and the limbs. Jumonji no kamae, hirichimonji no kamae, those kind of things, right? In ninjutsu, the kamae name expands beyond that and reflects the sanjin, right? The three bodies: physical body, the mind, the psychological body, and the spiritual body or the emotional body, right? So very, very different, okay? So we'll circle back on some of these things, but if we get this wrong up front, then everything is based on that. Okay, any of my folks that follow along, or if you've studied Tibetan Buddhism, or you just like New Age stuff and whatnot, and you've encountered the Tibetan Wheel of Life, or the concept of the 12-fold chain of dependent origination, which is just a really more involved way to teach the law of karma, cause and effect. Okay, please don't mistranslate karma as fate, destiny, all that other bullshit that goes on. Okay, again, if we get the definition of the thing we're talking about wrong, everything else falls apart, and that's where I was going with this. Okay, the 12-fold chain of dependent 12-fold chain of dependent origination is often shown or depicted in artwork as literal links in a chain. Okay, they're inexorably linked, right? Sometimes they can look like domino or like a kid's puzzle pieces that just have flat sides, or even like jigsaw puzzle pieces. And what that means is that they're connected, they're linked. One produces the next thing, produces the next thing, produces the next thing. Okay. So in the 12-fold chain of dependent origination, the first part is ignorance. And it doesn't mean that somebody's stupid. It means that they don't know any better. Okay. So they're operating based on a faulty premise about what something is or how things work, what's going on, those kind of things. So the way it's written is ignorance begets volition. Volition means action. Okay. And it's not just a physical action. Could be thought, could be speech, could be physical action, creates a belief system, creates an idea, whatever, right? And then that in and of itself begets consciousness, that begets name and form. It just runs on. But just with these first two links, right? If we misunderstand a lesson, it hasn't been clarified, or worse yet, we think we can train ourselves in something this deep. And so we're running around YouTube trying to pick things up and whatnot. And we start guessing. Ignorance begets volition. What that means is any action, thought, word, deed, belief, plan, idea, whatever, based on a faulty premise is flawed from the beginning. And everything after that will be flawed. Everything after that will cause suffering. Okay? Now, it may not become readily apparent until the right conditions arise, but, and this is where we really need to dive into this, okay? So when we look at Kamae as static poses, as dachi, right, as stances, or as mere prep for a technique, right, we lose like 90% of their value, okay? Yes, Kamae, at least on the beginner side, have a dachi-like aspect. There is this physical form that we want students to get, because the physical form is based on the principles, concepts, strategies, and tactics that Kamae is an example of. Okay? And if we understand that the Kamae in each lineage were developed not first, and then we're going to make up tricks and techniques and whatnot based on like this cool way of positioning or whatever, right? That we recognize that the lineage has strategic and tactical ways to handle a violent situation against a specific type, primarily, right? Kotoryu, Koppo Jutsu, right? This guy's coming in like a freaking tank, okay? Koto, knocking down the tiger, right? How the hell do you knock down a tiger? It's bigger than you. It weighs more than you. The outside of it, right? The way it's just built, right? All muscle, that kind of thing. Skull is thick, heavy, and whatnot. How the hell in the world, right? It's not just a cool name. The name points to how you need to function, how you need to do things to take down something that weighs, what, 5, 10 times more than you do? Or it might not be a tiger. It might be a Rottweiler. It might be, this wild animal that's just, so how do they attack, right? We have to know how they attack, right? We have to know their nature. And so there's a lot of this last second strategic angling, positioning, timing, that kind of thing. One of the principles in the Kotoryu in Koppo Jutsu is to be able to take the opponent down with one finger. It doesn't mean you're necessarily going to use one finger. It means that you're in the ideal place, that it's going to take very little to drop this guy, okay? So think about a tiger attacking, right? They maul, right? They'll try to trip you up, but then they're going to jump on you. And that's the moment, because the most vulnerable part on an animal like that, wild dog, wolf, tiger, whatever, is right here. And so we can't just wrestle them. We can't try to deal with their claws. We can't fight brute strength or brute force against their brute force. They already own that realm. So when they launch that attack, I can hunker in and attack that which will shut them down, right? But I've got to be precise. I have to be, right? So Koppo is for dealing with that tank that's coming at you, as opposed to like the Koshi Jutsu, where he's fast and very agile and whatnot, but so we force him into center, and then we navigate. We force him to chase us as opposed to the tank coming in. What we're going to do with this guy is we're going to wait for that ideal moment that we can attack the vulnerability, the weak spot, kind of like if it were a tank, right? I'm going to use my small rocket launcher, right? This small thing, right? To not just hit it, I want to hit that space between the turret and the base, right? The vehicle, right? Or I want to hit the part where I can jam up the gun so it can't do what it needs to do. And if I can hit that part where the turret pops, then a lot of that blast ends up hitting the guys and cooking the guys that are inside, making that monster move. Okay. So again, if we screw this up, if we just assume certain things, right, we actually lose 90% of the value of these kamae. Okay. They're not dachi. They're not stances. Okay. Hicho is often mistaken for just being a test of balance or a flashy move. And we'll talk about something else here in a minute because I don't want to give too much away. But in Ninjutsu, it is a tactical decision, not a pose. Well, sensei in karate, when they take up this crane stance or whatever, I mean, it's a tactical decision. Yeah, I know, but what's their tactic? Okay. Okay. So it's about mental readiness. It's about perception control, controlling his perceptions. And it's about strategic action from a position of apparent disadvantage. Now, we could be in a position of disadvantage, right? We'll talk about some of these things here in a bit. But most people look at that as, you're on one foot. There's this opportunity, right? You're in a weakened position. You can't move. You can't defend. Anything that you do is going to knock you off balance and help him. Okay. And if we don't understand the kamae, and that's how we're using it, they're right. Okay. But we need to make them not right. Okay. So something I introduced, my students know it well, but something I introduced during Kuden, during the podcast, was the kamae should be seen as outward manifestations of what's going on the inside, right? In our head, in our heart. So that's the last thing to pop out, right? Regardless of whether we're bored, we're excited, whatever. The body is telling what's going on inside, what our state of being is, okay? So kamae, right, are living things. Kamae are states of being, not just shapes, okay? We don't do kamae. We become the kamae, okay? The kamae is already going on. There's three aspects. Kamae are holistic, thought, word, and deed. There is a physical, yes, body aspect. That's where the confusion comes in with it's a stance. But there is a psychological kamae. There's a psychological Hichō. There's an emotional Hichō, spiritual Hichō, right? Relationship Hichō, all kinds of stuff, okay? All right. So let's do this. Let's start with talking about what Hichō is not, okay? So trusty little pen here. As a matter of fact, let's use red for contrast, right? Make my little, it's not that kind of thing, okay? So Hichō no kamae is not, it is not a karate or kung fu crane stance, okay? It's not a crane stance. I still, to this day, see people putting quotation marks, single or double, around an English translation for Hichō, calling it a crane stance. Okay? I understand. Okay. But just because something looks like something doesn't make it so. Okay. Some of you guys already know this because you've been around me for quite a while, but one of my favorite quotes by our 16th president here in the United States, Abraham Lincoln, is huge on these idioms and little things to kind of paint a quick picture for people to understand, right? Like a simile. And there was a senator who was trying to get some law passed or whatever, and Lincoln was like, he was a constitutional master, and he's like, we shouldn't even be discussing this because that's not a matter for the federal government. That's a matter for each individual state, right? So this is already problematic. And the senator goes, well, let's just for a moment say that that's not a problem. See, then, like, what's your stance on this or what's your take on this? And Lincoln goes, how many legs does a dog have? guy just kind of stops and he goes, well, 4, of course. And he goes, okay, fair enough. Just for a moment, let's say that the dog's tail is a leg. Now, how many legs does the dog have? The senator goes, well, 5. Lincoln says, no, sir. No, sir. He still has 4 legs. Just because we called the tail a leg doesn't make it so. Just because we call or choose to define something some way, Hichō, as a crane stance, doesn't make it a crane stance, okay? The translation for the 2 kanji that make up Hichō, right? He, in this case, is the word means fly or flying or to scatter, those kind of things, right? And chō is the same kanji for tori, bird, right? So Hichō translated as flying bird. Okay, so somebody made up a cool name, right? We're going to call this the flying bird Kamae. No, okay? There's a story behind why it's called Hichō, okay? There's a kata in, I don't know, I'm going to get this wrong, probably Tagagi Yoshin, Shinden Fudo Ryu, maybe, something like that. It's called Hibari, okay? Hibari is the name of a field bird in Japan. Okay, so they named it after a bird. No, they named it after an action this bird takes or makes when it launches into flight. Okay, so it like does a squat. It'll take a step or 3 and squat and then launch itself into the air. That's what the kata. So the kata name is pointing to this action. Okay, so what the hell is Hichō pointing to? Hichō is pointing to a possibility for escape from a very, very vulnerable, if you don't get this right, you're going to die kind of position, right? And the story is wrapped around a constrictor snake attacking a bird for lunch, okay? So if you understand how constrictor snakes work, right, they don't use poison and whatnot, okay? So they'll very stealthily stalk up to their prey and then in a very opportunistic way, snatch it and coil around it. But very, very rarely does the constrictor snake catch the prey in the perfect position to choke it to death, right? To suffocate it, and then it can just eat it, okay? Very rarely does that happen. More often than not, what ends up happening is it catches it to catch it, and then it senses the position of the prey, and then it has to relax to shift into the best position, and then it tightens down, and then dinner is served, okay? So Hichō, the name Hichō points to this moment. It's about timing. It's about patience. It's about observation, okay? It points to this moment where, like when the bird's first caught, the bird, tries to get away or whatever, and then if it can just relax, it's not giving up, it's just holding. And it's waiting for that moment, because when the snake relaxes to shift, if the bird's in the right position, the bird can very quickly spread its wings and make that opening bigger just long enough to at least hop out of the hole, out of the coils, right? And then pull itself free of the mouth and whatnot, because they don't have fangs. They have like teeth, right? So it's just easier for them to get out, right? And then they can take off. Or in that moment where they open the snake up, right? The snake's surprised, the mouth may open and they can get out and they can take off, right? This points to that moment. This moment of overwhelm, this moment of vulnerability or apparent vulnerability, this moment where I can't do anything. I need to hold and I need to wait for that perfect moment, because I can't fight what I'm dealing with at the moment. So I pay attention, right? And I'm adaptable. So observation, deception, talk about that as we go along, and adaptability, right? I'm going to circle back here after we go through a bunch of this stuff here to take a look at the differences, some of the differences between a crane stance and the way it's done in a lot of conventional karate or kung fu schools, okay? Are there exceptions? Of course, there's always exceptions, Okay. But we're going to take a look at the comparison between what Hicho no Kamae is doing and the way people normally see a crane stance. Okay. So this is when we're talking about this, right? Hicho is not a test of balance or a show of strength. Could we use it for those things? Of course. Right? Of course. Right? Especially for upper level people who are using Kyujutsu Tenkan, right? Disguising truth and falsehood. I may take up a posture to show him, look, dude, I can kick your ass on one leg, which might cause him to flare up and want to come in and attack, right? Or I might make it as a show of strength or whatever, right? And so, or I might take it up to make him believe that I'm a certain type of fighter, that I'm in a certain style of karate, certain style of kung fu, whatever. So if he has any experience in that realm, I know how to handle this guy. And then when he comes in, right, that's not what he gets. Okay, very different. Okay, so what else is Hicho not? Hicho is not a static pose to hold. Right, it's not static at all. It's not a static pose. Okay, it's not static. Okay? When we're in any kamae, the joints are not relaxed down on each other. There are support and mobility muscles that are firing that keep the joint, those two pieces, like in the knee or whatever, up off each other. And there's a state of hovering. There's a state of motion that's going on in there. It's very, very small, but it's easier to get something in motion that's already in motion than to go from a dead stop into motion. Okay. Hicho is transitional. It's a moment in time, not a destination. It's a bridge between movements. All right, we'll talk about that more as we go along. Okay. What else is it not? Right. Hicho no Kamae is not a passive defensive shell. Right. It's not a passive defensive shell. Right. So what that means is I'm not just hovering and waiting. Could I be? Sure. Okay. But there's something else that's going on, deception, that makes it look like I'm just waiting for him to do his thing. But see, when you put yourself in a position like that, jackwagon's going to try to get tricky. In last night's advanced class, we were working with just Hicho no Kata. So this base model that everybody like learns and then thinks that they've graduated from and keeps and moves on. Okay. Everybody thinks they know it. And what we did was we worked the base model and then we worked it against a leg sweep, right? So we clear that leg and then he like sweeps and then resets, sees us in the single-legged position and comes flying in, okay? Great, right? But what I allowed students to do after that was the person who was attacking could change the angle of the punch that was coming in, okay? Because we're not just standing on one leg. Hatsumi Sensei has always said, we're not just standing on one leg. We are able to move and control in this 360 bubble. We can move in this 360 bubble, okay? And so my uke last night, Shoshi Whistler, he's a, seventh dan? And so instead of coming in straight off this thing that makes that block easy, he started to come in and then hooked around. And so I had to move and do the block from this other angle, right? Without losing my balance, right? So does balance have to be really good in Hicho? Yeah, of course, right? But it's not a test in balance. It's a test in relaxation. It's a test in control of and minimizing tension, those kind of things, right? So this is not a passive shell, right? Hicho no Kamae invites an attack for counter control. Right? What I kept saying last night was, come into my parlor, said the spider to the fly. Okay, so it's the same as Ichimonji, right? We have this angle going on. Please don't do this angle. Right? We'll talk about this thing here. That's why I have the pictures up here. Okay, this is really, really important. Okay, not this. This is a target. It can be grabbed. It can be struck, but it also feeds him some information that we don't want him to have. So this is very important. But Gyoko Ryu Kamae invite straight line attacks. Koto Ryu Kamae invite off angle or circular attacks. Okay, because one is linear, that's the answer to circular attacks, and one is circular, that's the answer to linear attacks. Okay. Anyway, what else is it not? Okay. It's not a kick setup only. All right. Most people treat Hicho as though when that leg comes up, we're either feinting a kick or we're delivering a kick. And I can understand that because when they see it from the perspective of a crane stance, crane stances are often taken up. There's a lot of stability. There's a lot of, there's a strong base and whatnot to deliver this strong kick. But therein lies a problem as well, because the way we deliver kicks in Ninpo Taijutsu, Budo Taijutsu, is very different from the way most conventional martial arts deliver kicks. In most martial arts, the body is used to create the proper distance, and then the power is generated by the limb. Okay? Punch, kick, doesn't matter. In Ninpo Taijutsu, the limbs establish proper distance, and the body behind the strike produces the power. It's not the same. Okay? So what we're looking at here is that in Hicho no Kamae, kicking is one tool that could be employed from a Hicho no Kamae. It's not the purpose of the Hicho no Kamae. Okay? And then that just kind of leads with finishing up with that Hicho no Kamae is not a physical stance alone. Putting the word stance in parentheses here, right? Alone. Okay? It's not this thing that we go to launch attacks from. Can we? Yeah. But that's an option. It's a strategic and tactical choice. It's not the purpose of, okay? When we look at Kamae like stances, what we see is something like a cannon where we're going to position the cannon and fire the volley. Okay? Can you do that with Kamae? Of course. But if that's all you have, then you're predictable, because it's exactly what it looks like to everybody else who understands stances. Okay? So it's just flat out problematic, because if he knows what you're doing, okay, if he can figure you out, if you fight like everybody else, well, then he already has experience with dealing with it. He's already seen it, and he probably already has a couple of counters for it. Okay? So Hicho is not a physical stance alone, right? It embodies mental, emotional, internal posture as well. Okay? All right. So what do I have next here? I'm going to jump over this part, and let's go to this strategic triad that I've created, right? The strategic triad, right? So we're going to take a look at, call it 3 pillars, call it the 3 points on a triangle. I don't care, right? Whatever serves you, okay? We're going to take a look at 3 important pieces from Hicho just to get you started, okay? All right, so the first one, right? I actually had these things up here, right? So the first one is patience and observation. Okay. Internally, which should be reflected externally, Hicho is about being able to stay calm and focused under pressure. Okay? It's the pressure that makes all the difference. Okay? Anybody can be calm and focused and whatnot when everything's going their way. Okay? Martial artists and self-defense people are the biggest control freaks in the freaking world, right? Because that's why we get into it. We don't want to be in a situation where like the shit's hitting the fan and we're out of control. But the problem is that the worse the situation is that you have to deal with, the more you're either going to start from or could possibly within the mix of it find yourself out of control, and you have to reestablish things very, very quickly. Okay. One of the things I was just talking to students about in class last night is when Hatsumi Sensei was training with Takuma Sensei, right? He had this thing in his dojo, and they would often talk about this, but he just had it kind of hanging in his house because that's where Hatsumi Sensei went to train. But when Takuma Sensei trained with Toda Sensei, in Toda Sensei's dojo, there were these ninja admonitions hanging on the wall. Okay. And the very first one, it's not that it's mistranslated like literally. It's not understood in the context of how the Japanese look at things. Okay. And so again, I'll just kind of summarize it, but the whole idea here is that endurance or perseverance should be established in the time frame of a puff of smoke. So think about a cigarette, cigar, pipe, whatever, okay? There's a puff, there's a release of the smoke. How long does it take for that to dissipate? Where you can't see the cloud anymore. You can't see the particulates. They've assimilated into the air, okay? Most people tend to look at that as in we need to learn to persevere and endure very, very quickly as a part of our training, okay? But that's not what that points to. What that points to is in a situation of overwhelm. You have been surprised, all these kind of things, right? You have to get your shit together really, really quickly. You have to get back under control. So the analogy is in a bad situation, that's your maximum amount of time that you have to get your shit back in order, or things just start going sideways much, much faster. Okay. In the time it takes for a puff of smoke to dissipate. That's how quickly we have to be able to get back on the perseverance endurance train, get back to patience, get back to nin. Okay. Everything goes back to nin. Okay. So what we're looking at here is what kind of situations could put us in a Hichō-like state, accidentally or on purpose. Okay. So the first one where we're in control is we deliberately appear still or unready. Right? We look like we're just not paying attention. And he thinks he has an opening. This is really important in like multiple attacker stuff. Okay. Getting somebody to attack when he thinks he has free will, he thinks he has the opening, he thinks you're unprepared, but it's a trap. Okay. But that's not it, right? So another one where you're in control is you force an attacker to attack first, even the person who's trying to get you to attack so he could say that you punched first, so that's why he beat your ass. He was just defending himself, okay? The other thing this does is it trains calmness, or trains you to be calm under pressure, under threat of injury, damage, whatever, okay? And it also helps to build focus in moments of discomfort, okay? So there's a quote, and I can't remember which of my teachers said it. I've got these things all over the place, right? Stillness is not inaction. Just because we look like we're not moving doesn't mean the mind's not doing things. It doesn't mean that our zanshin, our awareness and sensitivity faculties are not functioning. The radar's not on. It doesn't mean that the joints aren't, right? Everything's kind of adjusting and whatnot. Not because we're trying to hold our balance, but because we're in motion, okay? Stillness is not inaction. It's awareness without interruption, okay? That's very different, okay? So core concept number one is patience and observation, right? He who moves first doesn't always win. He who moves best at the right time does, okay? So here's a quick story, because most of the people in the world think that Americans are just freaking cowboys because we like guns and all that kind of stuff. So let's use a little analogy about cowboys, right? There is this dumbass, non-historically verifiable myth that is presented in almost every cowboy movie where there's this shootout at high noon in the main street outside the saloon or whatever. And that myth is that the fastest draw was the winner. That's not historically accurate, okay? The people who won in gunfights, very often, as soon as that person went to move, right, they knew he was fast, or we're exactly the same, right? When you're settling a dispute, mutual death is not an option, okay? That was a huge ninja lesson I got way back in the day, okay? Oh, it was a good fight. Screw you, okay? Mutual death is not an option. So what would happen was this guy would be standing like he was ready to go. And as soon as that one went to draw, he'd do a dive roll to the side or whatever, right? And come during that time, he'd be drawing. And while this guy's trying to chase him down, that would give him that time to get that shot off and be much more accurate. So most of these gunfights did not go to the fastest shooter. Okay? It went to the person who had tactical movement and gave themselves the time to take the shot. Okay? So again, he who moves first doesn't always win. He who moves best at the right time does. Okay? So Hicho symbolizes the mental skill of waiting without stalling. Right? A lot of people, when they're waiting for things, or they're waiting for, who knows, they're waiting for the ride to show up. They're waiting for the clock to, to punch in or whatever, right? What are they doing? Right? They're doing shit like that, or they're like distracted, they're bored. Can you watch the clock without being bored? Can you watch what's going on around you so that you're not inattentive, right? Can you gather information and be doing something that's conducive, that serves you during moments of waiting, so that we don't lull into a state of boredom, distraction, or whatever that absolutely sets us up to get our asses kicked because we'll be easily surprised, right? We're also looking at emphasizing that standing on one leg forces internal stillness. It forces centerline control, and it forces internal calm, right? Because any tension, any disruption, right? Any surprise, right? Run the risk of falling off balance. And we start with relaxation, right? Stillness, centerline, and all that in the hip, knee, and ankle of the base leg. Because one, there's an alignment between those three joints that keep us standing. Two, we need to recognize that what we're always doing as bipeds, right? Two contacts with the ground. We're not a three-legged stool. We're not a four-legged dog, whatever. Okay, we've got 2 points with the ground. We are always neutralizing the effect of gravity on us. So our ability to feel gravity and align things to naturally neutralize the force of gravity, so it pulls down through the body, down through the center line, keeps us from fighting things because our brain is in panic mode because we're only on one foot. Okay, it's very different. Right. This also points to the connection to one of the three aspects of a ninja, which is Shiku Oshinobu. Okay, perseverance under pressure. Okay, the ability to stay calm, stay aware, and focus. Okay, so Hicho forces you to slow down mentally and pay attention, not just to your attacker, but to what they're also not showing you. Okay, there's a lot of things that I don't know. Just because he's over here and he looks like he's going to punch, okay, great. How? What's the line of the attack? Is it going to change mid-direction? Well, not in a kata, not in a dojo. Well, no shit. Welcome to the world of the Mutual Admiration Society. We're all going to do it the same way so we can all feel good about ourselves because we can do it in a sterile environment. But that's not what we train. That's certainly not why the past masters passed it down. Right? So just like with Shoshi Whistler last night, right? He's straight in front of me. He came in, right? I had to wait until that fist breached. I had to know what target it was going for. Right? And all of a sudden, he lifted an elbow, and it changed the arc of that punch to come in at my floating rib. Right? And I had to change and meet it and then finish the kata based on where he was. So I had to be adaptable on one foot. I had to have control of my center line. Okay? I couldn't let that change in angle or him doing something unexpected. Well, the reason why we say that somebody did something unexpected is because we already had predetermined expectations. If you don't have any predetermined expectations and you're actually observing what's going on, not what you think is going on, he'll never do something unexpected. He'll do whatever he's going to do. And as long as we're adaptable, Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. Okay. So during the Friday masterclass, we're going to work on a drill or two where a student will be forced to stay in Hicho and observe multiple angles or cues before acting. What that means is I'm going to let the attacker come in any way they want, and they're going to have to receive from Hicho in that position. Okay. And so the point is to help the student feel what it means to stay in tension, right? To stay in an environment of pressure without prematurely reacting, without jumping the gun, without making false assumptions, dealing with exactly what's going on in front of us. Because when we're in an overwhelmed situation, right? I mean, is it a tactically good idea to be on one leg? No. So there has to be something different to those tactics, right? We're in an apparent vulnerable position, which means that our skill set and our skill proficiency has to be way freaking higher. But a lot of people like that, well, hopefully that student or that listener that spoke up during Monday's podcast, where they had up to this point discounted Hicho, hopefully they're looking at it from a completely different perspective. Because we're not always going to be in control, especially if this person has taken the time to stalk us, to pay attention, to watch if we've ever fought before, to listen to the way we speak and describe how we would do things. Oh, they're just collecting information. Okay? If they're trying to get us, it's not in their interest, not in their best interest to do what we expect. So we have to, again, it's a really bad translation to say that we have to expect the unexpected. How about if we just stop expecting for shit to happen a way because we think we know everything? It's very different. Okay, that's what puts us into a bad position. As soon as it doesn't happen the way we expect it to, that's where the anger comes in. That's where the frustration comes in. The depression comes in. The life isn't going my way. Whatever, right? There's corruption in the world. That's why I can't be successful. Yeah, there's corruption in the world. How do you be successful in spite of it? Lots of people have without being corrupt. Okay. But see, it's easy. It's comfortable, right? When we're not in control to just play the blame game. Okay. Martial arts, especially these, now we have something here where it doesn't matter how overwhelming the situation is. Now, if it's so overwhelming that you're going to die anyway, well, then just fucking accept that you're going to die. There's nothing, if there's truly nothing you can do about it, okay? But just because we're in a position of overwhelm doesn't mean that we can't hold and wait for that thing, that opportunity that allows us to change things, right? Hicho is also an exercise in yin yang. I covered that during Kuden as well. So if you missed that, I'll try to make sure that I put a link to it. But if you're on the YouTube channel and you go to the live tab, you'll just see a run-on. And they just alternate, right? Kuden, Whiteboard Wednesday, Kuden, Whiteboard Wednesday. Very rarely do we have something else that's in there because I just don't do a lot of lives over there. So they're all there. But the one for this week, you can pop those kind of things in, okay? So patience and observation, right? Hicho, you are in a disadvantaged position. You're on one leg. The human body cannot change direction. It can't steer or move around in the world until both feet are on the ground. Okay. Here's the other interesting thing, right? We as human beings, I posed this during last night's class and actually a class for beginners in the morning, right? When you're walking from point A to point B, let's say you get up off your comfy chair that you're sitting in now or whatever the hell you're doing, right? And you go to the refrigerator or you go to a cabinet or what, just get something, right? And you're walking. What percentage of the overall time are both of your feet making contact with the ground? I'll tell you. At best, it's 10%. At best. The rest of the time, you're moving on one leg. Which means we're in Hicho more often than not because Hicho, didn't I just say that? It's not a static pose. It's not a physical stance alone, that kind of thing. Anytime you're on one leg, shift over, you get 90 to 100% of your feet on one, weight on one leg. You pick up a foot, scratch an itch on your ankle, whatever, right? You're in Hicho, okay? You need to be able to see that. All right. So next one in the triad here, the core concept number 2 is deception by design, or deception as a tactic, not a trick. I'll talk about that more here as we move along, but deception by design. The average human being makes the assumption, especially if they're trying to knock your ass around, we know how limited we are on one foot. Instinctively, we know. So if you're on one foot, he thinks he's got hit. He thinks he's got everything. Okay. But there's some really cool stuff going on. Okay. So one, if we look at the Kamae, right? So we got this guy punching up here, but this guy's in Hicho. Okay. Here's another reason that this is not a crane stance. Okay. In crane stances, very often the thigh is up higher. And even though the lower leg is hanging down, the foot, there's tension in it, and the toes are positioned up because it's prepped for a kick. Okay? In Hicho, the knee is in position to guard the groin, and the foot is relaxed. It's down because I don't know what I need to do next. Do I need to step? Do I need to cross step? Right? In Hicho, I may need to cross step. I don't know where I need to go. So I need to be open and able to go. Could I kick? Sure. Okay. But here's this huge piece that's in here. Okay. This raised leg hides your leg length and telegraphs nothing. Okay. Hides leg length and telegraphs nothing. Not only hides the leg length at a distance, if you look at yourself in the mirror and whatnot, right? You know how long your legs are. But because it's broken, it's at this broken angle, it disguises the length. It's the same as this. See, if I hold my arm this way, he can see. If he knows the length of my limbs, he can take proper distance. It's the same with staff work, sword work, knife, whatever. If he can gauge the length of your weapon, he can take proper distance for powerful strikes, for jamming you up, for whatever his techniques are. Okay. So it is in your best interest, tactically and strategically, to conceal the length of your limbs so he can't take proper distance. Okay. So from a distance, this screws things up. Okay. He actually thinks that you're more open than you are. Okay. It's the same thing with the arm. Arm position is the same thing. Okay. But there's something else going on. Okay. When most people see Hicho no Kamae, they're watching a video, they're looking at themselves in the mirror, they're looking at a static picture. Well, of course you can see the damn leg. Okay. But if I started out at Ichimonji no Kamae and he came into punch and I pulled up into Hicho, what can he not see from that position? He can't see that space. If he can't see it, how does he know what you're going to do with it? So it creates hesitation, right? Disappears, but it also creates a moment where out of sight, out of mind. He can forget it because he knows he's too far away for a knee. Interesting, huh? Okay. But if he doesn't know what you're going to do with it, okay, that's cool. Same thing with the hand, the rear hand. Okay? If you can't see it, because this is a smoke screen. If you can't see it, then he doesn't know what to do with it. Okay. So, not sure what just happened. I hope we still have internet, but my light just went out. I don't know why, but it's okay. We'll just keep on going. All right. So, as a matter of fact, let me just switch gears here. I hate doing this live, but those of you on the recording, you'll just have to need to see. All right. Hopefully you guys are still on. Let's see. It still says I'm live. I don't know if there was a glitch in the system or what, but we're back on, and I will try to pick up where I left off, and then we'll have to edit things later. All right. So let me check chat again. Let's see. Boom, 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 boom. Okay. For some of you who need to just overwhelm the chat thing, there's a reason I don't put the chat up on the screen. So we'll just call it that. All right. Anyway, okay. So I'm going to continue on. Hopefully everything works out, and if not, I'm going to end up having to do a part 2 later on. Okay. So let me bring my notes back up here. Okay. So again, there's a bunch of stuff going on in here. Okay. So the raised leg hides the leg length. It telegraphs nothing. It actually hides the lower leg itself. The angled arm forces the attacker to punch high or low, depending on how I have this. Right. It appears weak, but functions actually as bait, right? And it creates misjudged openings. Okay. So again, another one of these quotes that I had from one of the teachers is, let them believe that you are vulnerable. You will find their weakness in their confidence. Right? People think that you're not looking, when they think that you're not ready, when they think that they have the advantage, right? They'll just start talking a whole lot, or they will they'll show their cards. Okay, they'll show how much they know, don't know, whatever. Okay, and that's not just physically. Okay, you can see when somebody needs attention. You can tell when somebody is low on confidence or whatever. They try too hard. They try too hard. They either try too hard to mask it, or they try too hard to convince you of the opposite. Okay. So again, this goes back to an original lesson, right? A ninja does not meet strength or strength. He invites it, misleads it, and then owns it. Okay. So if we break down how the visual nature of Hicho is intentionally misleading, again, the raised leg, right, hides leg length, creates false openings, hides potential because he doesn't know if you're going to step, doesn't know if you're going to kick, right? Creates hesitation, those kind of things. The lead arm angle disguises reach, forces line of sight challenges, and the one-legged posture suggests vulnerability, which becomes bait. Okay, so the more you know, the more you can use it. Okay. Deception in Hicho isn't about lying. Okay? A lot of people think that the ninja with manipulation, all that kind of stuff, there's lying and whatnot. Okay. If you lie, you get caught in lying. Okay? Deception in Hicho, deception in ninjutsu, is actually about encouraging the enemy to see or think what they want to see or think. Okay? That is how you lead people around, because they think it's their idea. Okay? If you try to convince them of something, they can resist. Right? They can see holes in it. Right? They can run contrary to it. But if you tell them what they want to hear, you show them what they want to see, you give them what they want to have. That's how you control something. Okay? So again, for the Friday Masterclass, what do we have up here? The Online Ninja Academy thing here. It's on the base of the screen there, right? We're gonna look at how to hang out in Hicho long enough, right, to get your attacker to commit. Then you move or strike just as they believe that you're at your weakest point. Right? We're also going to show you how to do like again the gash and whatnot with your lead leg. Right? Most people think of like these powerful kicks that are moving in, but you can shift the leg out of the way, you can catch it, and do all kinds of cool stuff with it on one leg. Okay? And again, for everybody that says this stuff doesn't work, don't tell me that unless you've tried it and it hasn't worked for you, and then show me so I can point out why it's not working for you. Okay, because this stuff has worked for thousands of years. All right. So anyway, all right, and then let's move into the third one: strategic adaptability. Okay. Strategic adaptability. Okay, so this is core concept number 3. Right. Strategic adaptability from imperfect positions. Okay? Again, I said this earlier. Martial arts and self-defense people tend to be the biggest freaking control freaks in the world. And then they freak out when they lose that control. Okay? So Hicho is the shape of the chaos moment when you're off balance but still dangerous. Okay? This is a quote from one of my teachers. Hicho is the shape of the chaos moment. Okay? We pulled the leg, we're in that position, but we're still able to function from there because we had to avoid what was coming in, but we can still operate, right? We still have freedom of movement, okay? So Hicho is the shape of the chaos moment when you're off balance, but still dangerous, okay? So Hicho represents moments of disadvantage in real conflict, okay? You could be wounded, you could be tired, you could be holding on to something, okay? So you don't have all your limbs, right? You could be already in motion, right? You're already kicking, you're already punching, right? And you can't ground fully, right? There's a technique that we have for the advanced students where they're, people think that this is a style, so we would never do something that some other style does. Well, those hook kicks, those back hook kick kind of things, okay? That's a bailout position for us, okay? Because I could be doing a front stomp kick, and he flanks me to take advantage of things, and very quickly, I'm going to turn, deliver that, do a roll, get the hell out, okay? So it's the ability to move on one leg. Can you leap from Hicho to Hicho? Can you leap from a two-legged thing to Hicho? Can you change your footing and your position to be able to handle this 360-degree bubble that you're in, right? The other disadvantage kind of thing that we'll just kind of round it out with today is you could be cornered and you have to use misdirection to create space, okay? Either way, you have to think about that analogy from the beginning. Remember that Hicho thing, right? That flying bird, that escaping bird, okay? You're the bird. In the moment we're talking about using, it's not necessarily this Kamae. You could be in an argument. You could be dealing with a pushy salesman. You could be dealing with an overbearing boss, whatever, right? You could be dealing with a financial problem or whatever, okay? So you're the bird. And the problem is the snake. And so there might be that moment of panic, but this reminds us, recenter, pay attention, and wait for that moment that you can act, okay? So Hicho is also an example that your job isn't to win from a position of perfect balance. Your job is to adapt, to strike, evade, or reposition, even while off center. Okay? Hicho's a reminder that you don't need perfect conditions to be effective. You don't need perfect conditions to win. Okay? Most people believe that if it's not perfect conditions, well, then if you won, then it was just luck. If their skill set's shitty, if their skill sets require perfection, then yeah, okay, I'll buy that. Okay? So again, Friday's class, we're going to work some variations of Hicho, Hicho kata, and do some other things where we're going to focus on evasions, counters, and strikes from seemingly unstable setups. Okay? So we can teach you, if you're going to be there, or teach the students that are going to be there, how to find movement from limitation. Okay? And then if we bring all these three things together, right, bring these concepts together, what we're looking at is Hicho as a living tactical posture. Okay? So the stillness and observation allow us to see the right moment. Okay? The visual deception invites predictable reactions from him. Okay? From him. Because the human being doesn't need more than a clue or three to jump the gun and make assumptions. Okay? You can watch people, like, just go to the video. Sometimes it's on these things, but you can go to the videos and stuff, and just the run-on things, right? I can't possibly fight. I can't possibly have any experience. I can't possibly know what I'm talking about because what I'm doing is different from what they have seen, or because I have a gut, or because I'm bald, or because I'm old, or because I'm white. Who knows, right? Actually, I'm 5/8 Native American, so that bites them in the ass too. Anyway, so the adaptive response part allows us to use even weak positions to control the engagement. Okay? What most people don't understand is that by apparently giving up control, you actually get more control than you ever imagined being able to have. Right? So, very interesting. Right? So, again, right, if we look at this from a life reflection kind of thing, right, a life kind of situation, when in your life, well, let's make it a question, right? When in your life have you felt like you were on one leg, right? You were overwhelmed. Everything was just kind of not working in your favor, right? You weren't fully supported, but you needed to act, right? That kind of thing, right? Hicho teaches us to not panic when the ground is shaky, but to become precise, to become more calm, right? And in so doing, we become more dangerous as a result of being able to develop that kind of adaptability, right? So again, the ability to operate from limited positions, right? Whether we're fatigued, right? We're tired, we have an injury because of the terrain, right? A lot of people, they train in an open dojo or their backyard or an open field. There's no obstacles around, no trees. They cleared all the rocks and they made sure they weren't around trees with exposed roots and moved all the kids' toys out of the way and made sure everything was perfect, right? What are the chances that you're going to be attacked and there isn't a car mirror that you're going to bump into, or a curb up or down that you might step off of or bump into, flight of steps, whatever, right? Somebody else that's already been hit and knocked down that you might trip over, that kind of stuff, right? Okay. So Hicho is a mobile posture. It's not stuck, not fixed, right? So the whole idea here is learning how to do strikes, escapes, kicks, and all that kind of stuff from an off-balance position, right, or a precarious position. Right? This applies to real-world chaos too, right? Being surprised, lack of readiness, right? Haven't had my 15th cup of coffee yet, not ready for the tough shit, okay? Sport fighters, they know when the fight is, they know who they're fighting, they know all kinds of stuff, right? So they can diet for how long, they can exercise for how long, they can work the speed bags, because they're working up to and getting ready for the fight. In a self-defense situation, we have no idea, okay? So when you're off balance, stay fluid. When you're out of position, change the fight. Okay, so let's very quickly back up over here to this crane stance thing, because I know it took me a long time to get my head wrapped around this, because I came from these other martial arts and I just kept going back to this crane stance thing, right? So what I want to do very, very quickly here is take a look at Hicho versus crane stance differences, right? Crane stance in most lineages that I've seen, I don't know what it is in Chinese, but in Japanese, tsurudachi, right? So if you know it as that name, tsurudachi, okay? Crane stance, all right? So Hicho no Kamae is used as a transitional deceptive posture. It's designed to bait the opponent. It's designed to obscure your structure, right? Warp things so he can't really know for sure what's going on. He can guess, right? And it is designed to allow for quick evasive movement or counterattack, right? Hicho emphasizes strategic adaptability and tactical use of perceived weakness. We're actually going to use weakness or perceived weakness, right? What he thinks is a limitation, we're going to use it as a strength, okay? Crane stance is tsurudachi, right? Primarily is used as a balance and control demonstration. It's often within kata to showcase precision or to prepare for like a strong front kick, that kind of thing, right? Tsurudachi tends to be more static. It's focused on rooted strength and balance, okay? So that's basically purpose and strategic function, right? If we look at it from the perspective of movement philosophy, Hicho no Kamae encourages mobility, misdirection, and baiting. The raised leg can become a kick, it can become a step, it can become a trap, it can become a feint or a psych out, right? It keeps the opponent guessing. Right? Crane stance, it's typically a pause or a moment of stillness in a kata or form work that kind of highlights precision, right? Movement often follows a specific rhythm. It's not designed to be deceptive, but rather clear and structured. Right? It's not the same. Right? So for those of you who are working on deception stuff, like your Nidans working on Sandans, okay, know how to do a crane stance. Know how to make it look like you're doing one of these karate styles or these kung fu styles or whatever that employ them. Because if you move that way and you take it up and it looks like that and not a Hicho, okay? Now, you can't just do it against anybody. The average fighter is going to think it's bullshit. You're doing this martial arts bullshit, right? And they'll get overconfident, come rushing in because they don't fear martial artists. They've seen people do shit, and right, as far as they're concerned, streets the thing. Okay? But if you see somebody moving and they've got some telltale signs that they might be fighting from one of these perspectives, absolutely take up a crane stance. Okay, take up, think Karate Kid, right? Take up a crane stance so that he will make a quick assumption about what he's dealing with, and then when he comes in, you're actually going to move like you're in Hicho. Okay, so let's see what else we have here. So the raised knee and angled arms serve to disrupt the opponent's visual perception, right? Hides leg length, we talked about that, creates false openings. It projects vulnerability while hiding readiness. Crane stance, on the other side, emphasizes aesthetic symmetry and visible balance. Right? It's not designed to hide intent. It's designed to show strength and control. I can kick your ass on one leg, okay? That kind of thing, okay? So that's from a visual deception and display kind of perspective, okay? So let's wrap it up down here, okay? Hicho, I said this already before. Hicho is a living tactic, not a stance. Until we understand the difference between a stance and one of these postures, Kamae and a dachi, there's going to be some struggle, or there's going to be misunderstanding and assumptions that can throw us off. Okay, so I've got a couple things here, right? You are, I'm going to give you 3, and they are just 1, right? Operate and learn to do this, right? So that you are calm, okay? So that you are bait, okay? And that you are ready, okay? And learn to do this so that they are mistaken. For my guys that don't do big words like mistaken, they're wrong, okay? They've made bad life choices. They've guessed incorrectly, okay? Anyway, we're going to go ahead and wrap this up. Hopefully, let me get my screen back up here where it's supposed to be. There we go. Okay, so there's the link down there for those of you who normally join us for the Friday virtual training. We do it via Zoom. It's one of my regular advanced classes. Sometimes there's a bunch of students here. Sometimes there's just a couple. It's okay. But whoever's here live, we'll be working on it live. Those who are on virtual, some people just sit in their ass and they just watch the lesson and whatnot. But everybody's invited to at least get up and move and practice to kind of get a handle on what's going on. Right? For some of my students that might be new or early intermediate phases between all the classes this week, 2 of them yesterday, and then Friday, ass cheeks and thighs and legs might not like you very much because you're going to be doing a lot of movement as on one leg. Okay? So, but that's okay. Your body will adapt. Right? So anyway, that's what I have. If you need to, you need a review, you can always play the recording again. But if you have any questions, comments, I'd appreciate it if you posted your big aha moment in the comments, depending on where you are. Right? If you're on Facebook, if you're on YouTube, we're simulcasting across a bunch of different platforms here. So anyway, let me know, and then hopefully I'll see you for the Friday class. If not, I will see you next week on Warriors Whiteboard Wednesday. Right? Have a great rest.